right. Do you want to start?
Testing 1, 2. There we go. Can you guys hear off of this?
Yes.
Perfect.
Well, thank you for having us. We're excited to be here. As the introduction stated, we are life coaches. We're also authors, and in another life, a lawyer and a musician. We have also been in the mid-singles community for a long time. We were each married and divorced twice before we found each other. And so we have shared this journey that many of you are on, and we're happy to be here to talk about that.
Yes. Thank you so much for having us, Kimmy. Thank you for setting everything up. We've been in touch the last couple of months in preparation for this, and Becky, I believe, referred you all to us. So thank you both for setting this up.
You know, when I was kind of beginning my mid-single journey, I was going through a divorce from my kid's mom. It was a really difficult time. I mean, I woke up every day feeling like I'd been kicked in the stomach, and I carried that around every day, all day long for about 4 years. And it was relentless. I mean, there was never a break from it. It was always there. And so it was difficult.
And for me, it was heartache, like deep in my chest. Just it hurt a lot.
Right. Interestingly, they've done functional MRIs of the brains of people who have recently been through an unwanted divorce, and their brains light up in exactly the same places as people who are enduring physical pain. And so it actually physically hurts to feel rejected. Now, that isn't true of any other emotion. Garden variety depression, sadness, anger, fear, none of that. But when it comes to rejection, it actually hurts. And many of you have probably been through that. When I was going through that initial very difficult stage, a friend of mine who had never married, she was in her 40s and still hasn't, and now she's in her 50s. But she was a person I respected, and she recommended a book to me. And it was called Real Love by Dr. Greg Bear. Some of you are probably familiar with it. But anyway, I trusted her recommendation. So I ordered it on Amazon, and I waited until it came, and it didn't look like the kind of book that I would choose. But I decided to give it a shot on the recommendation of this friend, and I hoped it might bring me comfort, and it didn't, at least not in the beginning. It caused me a great deal of pain. And let me explain why. I had a story, a very elaborate story about my divorce and why it had happened and why it was all my former wife's fault. And the book challenges those ideas. It suggests that, you know what, we don't have a right to expect anything from anybody else, including our spouse. And that when we do, we're essentially not being loving. We are saying, in order for me to love you, you have to change. You have to be something else.
It also doesn't honor agency.
Right. And the thing about honoring agency is, if you don't honor agency, if you're forcing, manipulating, whatever, guilting someone into something, whatever form of manipulation you like, if you're doing that and you get what you want, it might be temporarily validating, but in the end, you kind of know that you manipulated it and it wasn't freely given, and love not freely given is not real. And we all kind of know that. And so that was a difficult pill for me to swallow. I ultimately did surrender to the idea, I don't know, 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through the book. And I started to think about relationships in a new way. I looked back on my former marriage and where I had been all about my wife breaking her covenants and didn't she promise to love me and stick with me and, all of these things we say. And I used those kinds of phrases and ideas to make myself the better person. And one of the things that book taught me was that really isn't a Christ-like way. It's really not real love.
Do you
And
think that it kept you stuck
oh
in
yeah,
pain?
yeah, that idea did, certainly.
So these challenging, even though it was painful, actually broke the cycle of with the constant pain you were having.
Right. And I would say parenthetically, we became good friends with Dr. Greg Bear recently, like in the last year, 11 something years after I read his book, and it changed my life.
And we interviewed him on LilyPod. So
That's
and
right.
it's an excellent interview if you want to check that out. I believe we just called it Real Love with Dr. Greg Bear.
Right. Another book that really spoke to me was The Anatomy of Peace. And I actually took a class where that was the main textbook by the Arbinger Institute. It's an institutional author. The Anatomy of Peace is a book about a bunch of parents at a parent seminar at a wilderness rehab program for kids, which in the book is called Mount Moriah. And it goes through the teaching that the parents receive in that program. And there's a lot to it, but let me suggest that the central key message is you've either got a heart at war or a heart at peace. You can't be in both places at once. What does it mean to have a heart at war? How do you get a heart at war? Your heart goes to war when you begin objectifying other people. And by objectifying, we're not necessarily talking about, we're making them appear in porn movies or something like that. Objectifying in this sense is either you're looking at that other person as a means to an end, a way to get what you want. How often do we see that in dating, in and out of the church? Secondly, we may look at the person as an obstacle to getting what we want. And either of those inner way of being is going to cause us to go to war in our heart with another person. And so, of course, the book talks about how these adults need to change their way of being overall, and especially with their children. And after I read that book and took that class, the next time I went through the Book of Mormon, it was a whole different experience. I saw the word hearts appearing in almost every chapter. It's all over the place in the Book of Mormon. And I want to talk about that a little bit. 1 Nephi 2:16. Nephi says that he was exceedingly young, but large in stature, and also had great desires to know the mystery of God. And he said, wherefore I did cry unto the Lord, and behold, he did visit me, and did soften my heart, that I did believe all the words which have been spoken by my father. Wherefore I did not rebel against him like unto my brothers. So he had an open heart and was able to receive a spiritual message, was able to receive revelation and comfort from God, and he didn't rebel as his brothers had done. And then verse 18, but behold, Laman and Lemuel would not hearken unto my words, and being grieved because of the hardness of their hearts, I cried unto the Lord for them. And then the Lord answers his prayer. Blessed art thou, Nephi, because of thy faith, for thou hast sought me diligently. How? With lowliness of heart. And so a major theme in the Book of Mormon, and I'm only giving examples of this for purposes of our discussion tonight, but a major theme in the Book of Mormon is that an open heart or a broken heart, a soft heart, is a heart that is open to love, to truth, and to new relationships, new information. What's the opposite of that? A proud heart, a hard heart.
We've
And-
even heard crusty heart.
Right. In chapter 7 of First Nephi, in verse 14, not 14. Verse 8, I, Nephi, he's talking about, well, let's go to verse 5 first. It came to pass that the Lord did soften the heart of Ishmael and also his household, insomuch that they took their journey with us down in the wilderness to the tent of our father. So Ishmael was open to going with Nephi and his brothers because the Lord had softened his heart. He had an open heart. He was willing to make a major change, leave his home, leave everything, go out into the wilderness with these people because his heart had been touched. And verse 8, Nephi is grieved for the hardness of their hearts, meaning his brothers. Therefore I spake unto them, saying, yea, even unto Laman and unto Lemuel, behold, ye are mine elder brethren, and how is it that ye are so hard in your hearts and so blind in your minds? Laman and Lemuel had hearts at war. How did that end? It ended with a genocidal war of civilizations at the end of the book, right? And so that's an important thing to understand, that when our hearts are at war, eventually we go to war in life. And that's why many of us got divorced. Now, I'm not blaming anyone here for anything that they did because they didn't know better or because they had a spouse that, was constantly nurturing war in their heart, or both. But the point is, when you go to war in your heart, you eventually go to war in real life. What did Laman and Lemuel do? They tied Nephi up on the ship, remember? And they thought about throwing him in the ocean. And, they went to war with him in real life.
And I think the scriptures often bring up big ways in which people are hard in their hearts, but there's also little ways in which we can do it on a daily basis. And Jeff and I have a great marriage, but there's been times we've gone to war.
Sure.
Not, it didn't look really terribly ugly. Like, we've seen some of that kind of traumatic interaction in our lives in previous relationships, but it was enough that we knew that we needed to shift back to peace.
Right.
Because really any kind of, if I'm in the way of, let's say, Jeff getting food because I'm standing in front of the fridge, he might, be a little ornery or something, just little things, right? It could be with our roommates. It could be with our friends. It could be with anybody. Right.
Could be with a former spouse that we share kids with. That's a very common one. Nephi says in 1 Nephi 7:19, and it came to pass that they were angry with me again and sought to lay hands upon me. But behold, one of the daughters of Ishmael, yea, and also her mother, And one of the sons of Ishmael did plead with my brethren, insomuch that they did soften their hearts, and they did cease striving to take away my life. So they had peace in their hearts. Their hearts were softened, they were open, and then they realized they didn't need to kill their brother, didn't want to. So that's another example in the Book of Mormon, one of many, about this principle that we're trying to teach. First Nephi 11:27 is one of my favorites. And here, sorry, I'm just finding it. All right, here it is. And I'm sorry, I gave you verse 27, but that wasn't the right one. I'm looking at verse 21 and 22.
Of First Nephi 11.
Yeah, 21 through 23. And the angel said unto me, behold, the Lamb of God, yea, even the Son of the eternal Father, knowest thou the meaning of the tree which thy father saw? And I answered him, saying, yea, it is the love of God. And how is that love manifest? Which sheddeth itself abroad in the hearts of the children of men. Wherefore it is most desirable above all things. Having a heart at peace toward others, having a heart filled with love is the most desirable above all things. And he spake unto me, saying, yea, and the most joyous to the soul. And then again in verse 25, he reiterates that the tree of life was a representation of the love of God.
Well, and we've heard that God is love and that we're created in his image, and therefore we can also be love. And our second podcast is actually titled God is Love, So Are We, because it's an energy that we can actually live in from him.
In First Nephi 12, we get the opposite. What is the opposite in Lehi's vision? It was the mists of darkness, right? It says the mists of darkness are the temptations of the devil, which blindeth the eyes, and you could probably finish my sentence, hardeneth the hearts of the children of men, and leadeth them away into broad roads, that they perish and are lost. That's the opposite of the tree of life, and it blinds our eyes and hardens our hearts. And if we're really honest, most of us who have been divorced at one point had some very hostile, angry, heart at war kinds of feelings toward our former spouses. And we thought that they were justified, that we were justified in those feelings because of the sins that were done to us. But that anger that lives inside of us will distort the truth. It blindeth the eyes of the children of men. You know, we call that in psychology, it's called a cognitive distortion. And it rises typically from trauma or fear, and you overreact to a particular conduct of another person. It could be totally innocuous, but it seems real. Fear, false evidence appearing real. So you can take a behavior that is seemingly innocuous, and if it reminds you in some way or triggers something in you to be fearful, you will tend to respond with a heart at war. Now, Cathy can tell you there was this time a couple of months ago where we were both in our bank accounts online, and I was trying to change my password. And anyway, she got triggered by something that I said or did, and she was upset. She was crying, and she knew, even as she was experiencing this, wait a minute, I'm overreacting. I'm really triggered.
Yeah, we call it emotional sunburns. And when they get tapped on, it hurts so much more than it would if you didn't have that burn there. In fact, if you didn't have that burn, a light tap wouldn't hurt at all.
Right. Now, there's a temptation for me, if I'm, feel challenged by what she's saying, to then strike back. That's natural, right? The natural man is an enemy to God. And so sometimes in these situations, we have to do what is unnatural. In that situation, I don't know, do you want to tell the rest of it?
Well, I think it helped that not to put Jeff on the defensive by me being responsible for my own emotional well-being. And whether you're single or married, that's always true. Whatever anybody else is doing, we're always responsible for ourselves. I mean, it might mean taking ourselves out of a situation if it's just something we know we can't handle, but ultimately we are responsible for our own emotions. And when I took that responsibility, then Jeff, in his wisdom, came up and he gave me a hug. So, I mean, that's what most children need when they're upset, right? And most of us are children when we're responding to our emotional sunburns.
So there's something that Cathy was doing recently that bothered me. And it was, I found it triggering. And I knew that from experience that it's best not to try to resolve those things always in the moment. Sometimes you got to go for a walk, or you've got to take a deep breath, or you've got to have some food because you're hungry. Look for HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Any of those, we need to address our own needs before we get involved in anything sensitive. But I told her we need to talk, and
but you said it kind of like, we need to have a talk. I mean, like, whoever wants to hear that.
Yeah, the 4 scariest words in the English language. We need to talk. But yeah, that was probably a misstep. But I chose.
But for the hour, like in the interim while I was getting breakfast, I guess you're going to be nice to me, right? And he totally was.
And I chose during that time to lead with a question. Can you explain to me what this action that you repeated many times meant? And you know what she had in mind was very different than the horribilizing I did about it. And what would have happened if I would have responded in a way that was more objectifying? Like, why in the heck were you doing that? What's wrong with you? That sort of thing.
I mean, even that just like makes my heart sink.
Right. What if I had responded like that, or started the conversation with a snarky remark? I can do snarky remarks. I mean, I can come up with them pretty fast, but they don't help in a relationship, right? They, in fact, take your heart to war. So the opposite of the tree of life, the love of God that shed itself abroad in the hearts of the children of men, is the mists of darkness which harden the hearts of the children of men. And I think that's a very central message of this vision that we don't always emphasize. So when we look at what's in the way, if we're trying to develop dating relationships, or we want to get back out there and meet people, what's in the way? fear, trauma, and the natural man. Those are all related to each other. But they ultimately come from what? They come either from our past experiences, the trauma we've experienced, when perhaps we have been objectified by other people, and they come from our objectifying other people and taking our heart to war. Turning to Mosiah,
While you're finding that, is it okay if I interject a thought?
absolutely.
Okay. So this is going to get a little tender. Is that all right too?
Yep.
Okay. About 3 weeks ago, we found out Jeff's youngest son had passed away
At age
unexpectedly
24.
in a mountain climbing accident. And our whole world shifted for 2 weeks. I mean, we just were nothing but grieving, mourning, processing, planning funeral, attending funeral, all of that stuff.
I mean, Cathy can tell you, I don't cry at the drop of a hat. I mean, it doesn't bother me to, but for the first few days, especially, every hour I was breaking down.
And at some point in that first week, which was the hardest, I think you looked at me and you said, Cathy, you're married to a broken man. And I've thought a lot about that word broken, brokenhearted. And the ironic thing about broken hearts, in this case, it actually means they're strong hearts. It means they're open hearts. His heart was broken because of how much he loved his son, and I love him even more for it. He's not broken. You're strong.
Brokenhearted.
And strong-hearted. Yeah, strong, open.
Well, if you think about it, friends, vulnerability is courageous. When we're trying to put up walls and prevent people from getting in, is that it takes a lot more courage to tell people what you really feel, how you really think.
And to go ahead and feel pain when there's loss involved with people that we've loved.
And that includes the losses of divorce that we've also both experienced. Each of us has lost a sibling, and that was very painful for both of us. It was much earlier in our lives, but another very difficult thing. Mosiah chapter 11 talks about King Noah, and it says he did walk after the desires of his own heart. And he had many wives and concubines, and he did cause people to commit sin, and it goes on. So if he had many wives and concubines, it sounds like, affairs and things like that. He was objectifying the women under his kingdom. And it says in verse 5 that the priests that had been consecrated by King Noah were lifted up in the pride of their hearts. And in verse 14, that King Noah placed his heart upon his riches and spent his time in riotous living with his wives and concubines. So did also his priests spend their time with harlots. Again, objectifying women. And it says the eyes of the people were blinded, therefore they hardened their hearts against the words of Abinadi, and they sought from that time forward to take him. And King Noah hardened his heart against the word of the Lord, and he did not repent of his evil doings. The next chapter 12, verse 1, again, it talks about Abinadi is speaking to the people, and it says, Abinadi, the Lord commanded me, saying, Abinadi, go and prophesy unto this my people. Why? for they have hardened their hearts against my words. So this again is what we experience when we are in the midst of darkness, when we're living with a hard heart.
You know, something I've noticed in many of the chapters, Jeff, that you brought up is that hard hearts goes with blindness,
Right,
and open hearts, I can only assume, goes with clarity and seeing truth.
right.
I don't think that's been as clear, but the blindness and hard hearts has gone together in several of these different stories.
Right. I'd like to turn to Jacob and expand on what Cathy was just talking about. Jacob chapter 3 in the Book of Mormon. This is an interesting use of the word hearts in the first 3 verses. Behold, I, Jacob, would speak unto you that are pure in heart. Look unto God with firmness of mind. And like Cathy just talked about, hardness of heart often goes with blindness of mind, right? Here it is suggesting that we look unto God with firmness of mind. What is firmness of mind? I think the opposite of firmness of mind would be like an emotional roller coaster, right? It would be being constantly blown about by everything that happens because we don't have a strong core.
I think of firmness of mind as following your inspiration and not letting loud voices get in the way of it. And loud voices really from the midst of darkness with people with hard hearts and blind eyes who just say stuff and can throw you off track if you listen.
Right. So look unto God with firmness of mind and pray unto him with exceeding faith, and he will console you in your afflictions, and he will plead your cause. And then skipping to verse 2, O all ye that are pure in heart, lift up your heads and receive the pleasing word of God, and feast upon his love, for ye may, if your minds are firm forever. So again, a second reference to firmness of mind, the importance of being steady. Now, that doesn't mean you don't feel your feelings or that you don't have emotions. I mean, it's important to allow ourselves our feelings, but it doesn't shake who we are as a person on the inside. And the first verse of the next first line of the next verse is, but woe unto ye that are not pure in heart. So the same problem as before. What is the key then to using these principles about the human heart in dating and living our mid-single life? You know, what is the secret? Mosiah 4 verse 20 says, and behold, even at this time, this is King Benjamin talking to the Nephite nation, behold, even at this time, ye have been calling on his name and begging for a remission of your sins. And has he suffered that ye have begged in vain? Nay, he has poured out his spirit upon you and has caused that your hearts should be filled with joy. Heart at peace. Has caused that your mouths should be stopped and that ye could not find utterance. So exceedingly great was your joy. And then he talks about giving to the poor, and he said, and again I say unto the poor, ye who have not, and yet have sufficient, that ye remain from day to day. I mean, all you who deny the beggar because ye have not. I would that ye say in your hearts, that I give not because I have not, but if I had, I would give. And now if ye say this in your hearts, ye remain guiltless. In other words, it's not necessarily about what you do or what you're able to do, right? It's about what's in here that really matters. And then I think we get to something that is the central message of the Book of Mormon. Mosiah 5:6. They, the people, all cried with one voice, saying, Yea, we believe all the words which thou hast spoken unto us. And also we know of their surety and truth because of the Spirit of the Lord omnipotent, which has wrought a mighty change in us, or in our hearts, that we have no more disposition to do evil, but to do good continually. Their hearts were turned from hearts at war to hearts at peace. And again, verse 11 through 13, I would that ye should remember also that this is the name that I said I should give unto you, that should never be blotted out, except it be through transgression. Therefore take heed that ye do not transgress, that the name be not blotted out of your hearts. And further, I say unto you, I would that ye should remember to retain the name of Christ, written always. Where does it shed abroad? In your hearts. And further down, King Benjamin says that how knoweth a man the master that he has not served, or who is a stranger unto him and is far from the thoughts and intents of his heart. So we see again a huge emphasis on the mighty change of heart, and continuing in that. One more verse about hearts, Mosiah 7:3. It's
While he's looking for that, I had another thought cross my mind today. You know, when you get like a massage or you stretch and it hurts, but it feels good at the same time? Can you all nod if you know what I'm talking about? You know, I think a broken heart from loss is kind of like that. It really hurts, but it also hurts kind of in a good way. It's good for us. It's good for us to have loved and lost rather than to never have loved. I mean, Jeff wouldn't have traded his 24 years with his son for anything, not to miss out on that pain, for certainly. So I don't know. I just thought of stretching and massage today as kind of like the it hurts so good like thing, where, you know, when it hurts in that way, then you know you have an open heart, you know you have a strong heart.
Yeah, my son's name was Henry, by the way. And, you know, I thought about the fact that if we had known the end from the beginning, we had known he'd only be with us 24 years, would we have held back getting close to him because we knew it was going to be a huge loss? Well, I don't know. I don't suppose that we'll ever know the answer to what we would have done had we known, because we didn't know. And
kind of thank goodness, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's better we didn't.
And yet, in retrospect, even going through the terrible pain of losing him, I look back at all the love, at all the memories, at all the experiences we had together, more than many fathers and sons have in a lifetime, in the short years he was here with us. And I look upon that with gratitude.
Well, and one thing that Jeff likes to say is that he couldn't afford to take them on trips. So he just got in his car and drove, and they camped places. So, if you can't afford a lot, but you've got kids, just make it happen somehow, because they're only young for so long. They grow so fast.
Beautiful national parks, they're cheap. There's lots of ways to do it without a lot of money.
I did the same thing, only when my kids were little, they just wanted parties. So we did a lot of theme parties at our house, and it wasn't expensive, but it was a good time.
Yeah, and sorry, I misquoted. I said Mosiah 7:3, and it's Mosiah 7:33. But it reads, if ye will turn to the Lord with what? With full purpose of heart, and put your trust in him. Trust is having an open heart, right? And serve him with all diligence of mind. If you do this, he will, according to his own will and pleasure, deliver you out of bondage. Bondage to what? What would we be in bondage to? Well, it could be any number of things, but I would suggest that one of the biggest is having a heart at war toward the people that we should love. Now, Cathy, does being open-hearted and having a soft heart and having the mighty change of heart, does that make us vulnerable to being a doormat for somebody else?
Okay, actually, I have an answer to that, or at least I have my own opinion about it, and you guys can take this for what it's worth. The first and great commandment is to love God with all our heart, might, mind, and strength. And the second is like unto it, to love our neighbor as ourself. And I think often ourself is this afterthought we don't even think about, we don't focus on, we don't bring it forward. And I think we have to, because when we love God, we love ourselves and we love everyone. Like, it's all inclusive. There's no exception. And if we love us and we know we're his child and we know we're valuable, then we'll know that he doesn't want any of his children abused. And we'll take ourselves out of those situations. So I don't think that we will be a doormat if we understand that the love goes everywhere.
Right. And you can love someone else who isn't loving you back. And
the most loving thing might look like, okay, well, I'm going to allow you your agency and choose to be somewhere else.
Right. And so, but you can still love that person and not objectify him or her and make that kind of decision. In fact, it is better to make that sort of detached decision. I want to explore this concept a little bit of turning unto the Lord with full purpose of heart and how that delivers us out of bondage. And I remember one of those trips I was on with my boys. I was actually taking them back to their mom after the Christmas holidays, but I ended up getting stranded in my beat up old car in Snowville, Utah on New Year's Eve. And it was a long ordeal. To make a long story short, it turned out my timing belt was broken, that no mechanic was even going to be able to look at it for like 3 days because of the holiday and the weekend and everything. And we were dead in the water. We were stuck. And I remember that night just feeling the deepest shame that I had ever felt. Why couldn't I take care of my family better than this? Why do I only have a few $100 in my checking account? That won't solve this problem. So many of the things that we ask ourselves. And I'm going to say to the men out there, you guys know that we're worse about this than the women are. We feel like we have to be Superman. And we'll go in, if your family has to go into the bishop's office and ask for church welfare, the wife is probably just relieved to get it and the husband is feeling shame. So anyway, that's how I was feeling that night. I can say that ultimately my journey turning to the Lord brought me to a much better place, brought me to a place where I had a career that I loved and wrote a book with Cathy and was married to this amazing woman. And, you know, ultimately, even with heartaches that have happened since, you know, I understand what it says at the end of the book of Job, that God gave Job twice as much as he had before. You can look at Joseph, who was sold into Egypt, and, you know, he becomes head prisoner. Well, first head of his master's house, then head prisoner, and then prime minister of the entire country. And he saves a nation, saves his own family. And it reminds me of that verse in the New Testament, that when ye are faithful over a few things, God will make you ruler over many things. And what was it that was said about Joseph all the way through this story? At every phase, the Lord was with him. And so I think whatever story you are going through, whatever trials or pain you have experienced, realize that this is your path, that God is taking you somewhere better, that every loss is ultimately going to be compensated, maybe not just in the next life, but maybe in this life too, that oftentimes the losses that we experience are making room for something better. And Cathy?
Yes, I would love to just mention here that Jeff lost his youngest brother in 1993. And I lost my youngest sister in 2007. And now his oldest son lost his youngest brother in 2022. And in all three cases, we had new life enter the world. Jeff had his youngest son, who he named after his youngest brother. I had my youngest son, and he was about 6 months old, and we have our youngest grandbaby.
Our only grandbaby
Yeah.
so far.
Well, yes, I should say our oldest grandbaby ever. Yeah, because she's the first, and she's about 6 months old. And so, and it's become very apparent to me that in all three cases, life accompanied death for a reason. And it's been a blessing, a huge blessing to have that have happened. And I also wanted to mention that anybody who's ever listened to our podcast or YouTube channel will know, or even read our writing, Jeff brings up Joseph and Job a lot. And you want to know what the bishop remarks said at the end of the funeral? That's exactly what he talked about. I asked him after, I said, did Jeff tell you we talk about that all the time? He said, no, he didn't. So that was a huge tender mercy, wasn't it, Jeff?
Absolutely.
I mean, I still kind of wonder why he talked about it at a funeral. I'm still trying to figure it out. All I know is that it felt like God was seeing us.
Right.
In that moment.
So I want to conclude our remarks, and then we'll go to questions and comments. But I want to conclude our remarks by reading a poem authored by yours truly while I was on my mid-singles journey. The title is Walls. And if I can get my computer screen unfrozen, I'll actually read it to you. Okay, here we go. Look into a child's eyes and see the honest truth. Unhidden by fear or protecting lies is the innocence and faith of youth. He speaks without thought of consequence, truth springing from his unbroken heart, not meaning to take or give offense, nor to play a scripted part. His whole world can be watching a ladybug with wonder on a summer's day. no reluctance to take or give a hug, nor to say what he wants to say. A child can imagine a colorful story with vivid hope, which to him seems a blazing, brilliant, and endless glory, a land of miracles and magical dreams. An unkind word, a harsh correction, dampens the spirit, wounds the soul, and harms the heart's connections. The heart that wants to love and be loved is hurt by reproof and cold rejection. The soul that is open to truth from above is locked by the pain of expected perfection. The anger that quenches the fire of love and turns the heart to ice is the product of bitter anger too, and exacts an unthinkable price. Deep in the hearts of many people is an emptiness none in the world can fill. It bleeds us of strength and renders us feeble as we hide what is honest and true and real. Hurt by hurt, I build my walls to protect myself from pain and doubt. One by one, I cement my bricks to keep disappointment and bitterness out. Sorry, I lost my place.
There we go.
Okay. But protecting myself from grief and pain also protects me from joy and love. Protecting myself from doubt and fear quenches the light from heaven above. The walls that I build for a fortress of strength to protect me from pain and desperation morph and change to trap me at length in a prison of lonely isolation. I must let go of pain and open my soul to his love, his light, and his story. For the love of our Lord is real and strong. He will fill me with love and with glory. His pure love fills the emptiness and enables my love to flow free and begins to heal the bitterness that is locked inside of me. The prison walls must crumble and fall to experience liberty, love, and light, for the soul to heal and shine to all through the gift of spiritual sight. Let me be again as a little child, overcoming fear and pain. Despite dark moments and bitterness, make me open and free again. Tear down my walls of pain and shame. Let me love without fear or condition. With the boldness and trust of a little child, let my character grow to fruition. My pledge is to serve in love and joy and be to the world as leaven in the innocence of a little boy, for of such is the kingdom of heaven.
That's beautiful. I just have one thought to go along with that poem. I wore green today because I keep waking up at 4:44 with a lot of sadness. I think my subconscious is processing all of this when I'm sleeping because I like to keep busy during the day, and sometimes I like to avoid my emotions, even though I'm really working on trying to fill them. I wore this shirt because green is the color of the heart chakra, and I knew my heart needed a little support. And then later I realized, oh, we're talking about hearts tonight. This is perfect. And I just, as we've been talking, it's dawned on me that green is the symbol for go. And all the things Jeff just was talking about in the scriptures and also in his poem is like red lights. When we have a hard heart, we get stuck at a red light in life. So if we want to be able to go forward, if we want to progress, if we want to be able to receive all the blessings God has in store for us, because I really believe the blessings are in store. Whenever we experience sadness or tragedy or loss, there's blessings right around the corner, and it's really hard to know it and to see it, but I believe they are there. And so just think about green. Every time you see the color green, think of your heart chakra, and is it in go mode, in the open and honest space?
I testify to all of you that becoming as a little child means opening our hearts as they were in that stage of our life. It means that the fear that we are going to be hurt again, as we have been in the past, is cast aside. Not that we're not afraid, but that we decide to keep our hearts open. Because if we put up walls to protect ourselves in dating, it's hard to get rejected if you're turned down for a date, or you tell somebody that you want to go further in a relationship and they say, no, I'm not feeling that. I understand that hurts. But in order to experience the greatest joys in life, we have to take the chance. And ultimately, if we take the chance, if we open our hearts, if we let people know who we really are, rather than trying to be what they want us to be, and we share really a piece of our heart with them, that's how we're going to succeed in this. A lot of people, when we decided to write a book about dating, they thought, well, you're going to give us the moves. You're going to tell us the right lines to say, or, the tricks to get somebody to go out with you or whatever.
Yeah, we don't have any of that.
That's not what we're about. The most important thing is, how are you going to build an enduring love? And the biggest core secret of that is having an open heart and not a hard heart.
In other words, how do we show up in the world?
And I testify of that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.